guys, it's Kathleen here with another character analysis video. Today I'm going to be discussing Lee Everett from The Walking Dead, the game.
I'm Clementine. This is my house.
Hi, Clementine. I'm Lee.
Now, I'm a big fan of The Walking Dead, the comic books and the TV series and now the game. But what I really like about The Walking Dead is that it's a unique brand of apocalyptic storytelling. It's not so much about the horror aspect, though that definitely is an element, but it's more about the character development and seeing how these characters interact, like pulling all these different characters from different corners of society and class and you know, differences in behavior and forcing them to get along in order to survive. And it makes a really great story because as you begin to care about these characters, because there will inevitably be some characters that you will start to care about, hopefully, if the writers have done their job, then it will be more terrifying to you when these characters that you care about are in an at-risk situation, because you care about these characters and you don't want them to get hurt. So when discussing Lee Everett and his character development, I really liked that the route that they took with developing his character. You don't really know anything about him at first, you don't know the first moment you meet him, he's in a cop car going to jail, and you know that he is convicted of committing murder and murdering the man who slept with his wife, but you don't know if he necessarily did it. I mean, I definitely started to think that he did it by the reactions on his face while the cop is saying that he's innocent. But it's interesting, the cop that has witnessed so many killers in his life is convinced that Lee is innocent, because it's obvious that Lee's a very morally convicted person from the first minutes of the game, because he definitely seems like he is struggling with some guilt visibly on his face. But when you first meet him, you don't know whether or not he killed that man, and you don't really know much about him. You find later on that he had a family, and you find out that family was killed, and find out that he's a history professor, or was a history professor before he was sent to jail. But the thing about The Walking Dead is that it didn't throw this image at you to force you to like him automatically at the get-go. It didn't really work too hard at character development in the first few minutes. It was just survival the first few minutes. I mean, you get a little bit of backstory with the whole him going to jail and whatnot, but often in stories we just get thrown with this image of, oh, this is the epic, awesome character that you're going to play as, and you're going to like this character. It usually works though, like in the first few minutes of a game. I know Mass Effect pretty much did that. In the first few minutes of the game, it's like, yeah, this is the character, and the character's going to be awesome. But it works pretty much for some situations, but I'm glad that they didn't do that in this situation. So because they don't throw Lee Everett's character at us in the first couple minutes, we get time to discover who he is and what he wants. I mentioned a little bit in my Legion discussion that what a character wants is so much a part of what they do. And you don't really know what Lee wants at the beginning. At first, it is just about survival. That is the only thing that he can do. But you will begin to discover what he wants and who he is as you go along. And that's really brought out through Clementine, which I'll get to in a moment. But the interesting thing about the way the game constructed this story is that it's a unique type of tragedy. Tragedy usually has one character that you will typically care about or be able to relate to, and has a very stable position of, a very positive life at the beginning of the storyline, and then some event usually comes in and wrecks that, and you see them deteriorate throughout the rest of the story. So Rick is, in the comic books, he loses everything in the first few pages. As far as he knows, everything that he knows is gone, and even his family, which he later finds out his family's alive. But as far as he knows, everything is gone. And I think the comic books is really a study of how people deteriorate when everything that they know, like society as they know it, is just gone. And a lot of characters just completely lose it. And you can see that also in The Walking Dead, the game. But in the game, it's not so much about, I mean, you don't see Lee lose everything because he has already lost everything. So it's like he loses everything at the beginning of the story, before the story. It happens before the events of the beginning. And then, interestingly enough, the apocalypse offers him a new chance to have a new life in a way. But the sad thing about that, the tragic thing about that, is that he's gaining the respect of the characters that he meets, and he's gaining a family, which is what he always wanted. But you know that everything that he's gaining is not going to last. So it's almost more tragic that he is building himself, and building his reputation back, because you know that in this universe, in this apocalypse, that anything that you gain can't last. And it's almost more tragic to see him build himself up when you know that he's just gonna have the floor taken out from under his feet, to use a horrible cliche. But so it's almost more tragic because you're rooting for him. And here I am, like, hoping that him and Clementine will be able to have some form of future, but I know in my heart that it just can't happen because the world's gone to hell. Let me talk about Clementine for a second, because as I said, this is the character that really brings out who Lee is.
What's this thing?
Daddy said it's called a salt lick.
Yeah, but don't lick it. It's gross.
Did you lick it?
I don't know.
Now, when he first meets Clementine, it's obvious that he really cares about her and cares about her safety. And he's not awkward around her. He definitely displays some very paternal characteristics from the initial meeting with her. He knows how to interact with her. Whenever he interacts with her, he gets down on his knees and he looks her in the face and he speaks very gently and makes sure that she understands. He's always coaching her throughout the duration of the game. If you yourself are really bad with kids, I mean, you know how awkward you'll be. And if you see people, like, I worked with kids. I did this program with preschool for a while and babysat for many years. And I definitely know how to interact with children, but I know when people have no experience with kids, they definitely are really awkward, and it's obvious. But he's not awkward. He definitely knows what he's doing. Through these interactions, you really see that this paternal nature that he has, this very fatherly type nature, and this very selfless nature really coming out. And you see that this is very much a part of who he is, and that's later revealed at the end, and it makes so much sense at the end, but I'll get to that in a little bit. But Clementine is not just a very stark kid character. So many stories throw kids at you and say, okay, here's a kid, now feel bad that they're in a bad situation and hope that they don't die, because the bad thing about that is that there's no character development going on, because not every kid is the same. And Clementine is not just your average kid. I mean, she is very mature for her age, which makes her more enjoyable as a character to interact with. You don't feel like you have to just babysit her all the time. But she's not just this, I'm just terrified all the time and I'm just going to say some very childlike things and hope that you sympathize with me. She has some really funny moments. She has some quirks about her. She is a little bit mischievous, but she's also very mature. When Lee interacts with her, she understands things very easily. And it's obvious that she's very mature compared to Duck, because Duck is just like, I'm totally oblivious to what's happening and I'm just gonna be a little kid. So imagine if Duck was the one that we had to babysit. I mean, that would be a totally different story. I'm so glad it was Clem. Whenever Clementine is put in an at-risk situation, like whenever something is going on, the very first thing that he always has to do is protect Clementine. And I like that they didn't throw this at us. gave us pauses in between all of the action to get to know Clementine and get to see how, you know, this relationship built. Like, it wasn't just automatic, because you don't automatically develop relationships with people, you know. It takes time to learn to trust people, and it's obvious that Lee begins to care more and more about Clementine, and Clementine begins to feel very safe around Lee, and that she begins to trust him more and more. And so whenever she's put at risk, and Lee is literally, the first thing he has to do is protect Clementine. And I mean, regardless of the way that you play this game, he is always going to put her first. So one of my favorite interactions between Lee and Clementine is the moment where he's teaching her to protect herself on the train. And the reason why I really like this is because a lot of things are accomplished in this scene. I mean, it shows that he is really showing her about morality and how to survive in this horrible setting. And those are really valuable life skills, and it's a very father-daughter type moment.
First, don't be afraid of it. It's just a thing. Take it. But know where your finger is all the time, and don't put it on the trigger unless you want to hurt somebody.
Okay.
I don't know how it plays out if you weren't honest with Clementine, but I told Clementine that Lee had committed murder and that's why he was going to jail. And she took it very well because she's very mature. But in that moment, while he's cutting her hair, she admits that she's glad that she told him, and she's glad, and she asks him about murder, and he explains to her that what he did was wrong, and that murder is only necessary when you're trying to protect yourself or protect other people.
Killing is bad no matter what.
But you do it now to protect yourself. And to protect me.
And that zombies aren't real people, so it's not truly murder. And so that was a great moral lesson that I think she's going to continue to carry, hopefully through the next season. Let's talk about the interaction with the stranger, because this interaction definitely brought some great things to light. When Lee interacts with a stranger, the stranger forces Lee to acknowledge all of the decisions that he made and acknowledge whether or not he believes that he's a good person. And I think that part of the reason why Lee is saying, yes, I made all those decisions for a reason, and yes, I'm not a horrendous, amoral person like you think I am, because he knows that Clementine is going to be better off with him. But in that moment, Lee really has to realize that, I guess in a way he has to kind of forgive himself for what he did, but he also has to admit to himself that he's not the horrendous person that society might have expected him to be in the situation that he was in before. You know, he admits to himself that he's just someone that made a mistake, but he says that one of the best things that he says right in that dialogue is he says that the reason why he was so miserable and why the relationship fell apart is that he wanted a family, and that's why his wife ran off with someone else, because she didn't want the same things that he wanted, and they weren't happy with each other. But what Lee wanted the most was a family the entire time.
She traveled for work. I didn't like that. I wanted a family.
A reasonable thing to want.
So we fought, and it made my biggest fear come true. Got sick one day on my way to class. Canceled it and went home. Found her there with someone else. Killed him. I was mad at her for so long, and I can't imagine how much pain she felt.
In this apocalyptic universe, he finally gains that family that he always wanted. And he's fighting for that family that he has finally gained through Clementine. And, when he said that, I was just like, that makes so much sense, that that's what you always wanted, that you always wanted a family. So that when he met Clementine, and when that very fatherly nature came out, that was really who he was. That was one of the most pure and best aspects of his character. So the reason why Clementine was there was not just so that he had this task of taking care of a kid, but it really brought out who he was, and what he always wanted was to be a father. So in the last scene, when he's finally found Clementine and they're finally together, he is dying, and it's obvious that he's not going to survive. But he spends the last few minutes of his life coaching Clementine and making sure, just juicing all of the knowledge that he can possibly get out of himself so that she can continue to survive and get out of this situation safely. And that's just what he's trying to do with the last few minutes of his life, and comfort her as she's grieving the death of her second father, of her adopted father. And it's just heartbreaking.
You're strong, Clem. You can do anything.
But I'm little.
Doesn't mean nothing. You're gonna see bad stuff, but it's okay.
My parents. It's so horrible.
I can't imagine, Sweet Pea.
And now, you? Please. Please don't be one of them.
I really liked what the direction they took with Lee Everett. He was just a relatable character, and he was a genuinely good guy, and they didn't shove that he was a good guy in our face. They actually made him conflicted and made him in a situation where someone that was not so good would be in, heading to jail at the beginning of the story. But situations allowed himself to, it brought out that good nature that was always in him. So thank you guys for watching. Remember to comment, like, and subscribe, or Michonne will cut you. I'm just kidding. She won't cut you. I mean, this is like felt, so I don't know. But Michonne's pretty cool. Just wanted to show off that plushie. But anyways, I should go.